a pretty interesting card coming up on there. One match that I was kind of surprised they couldn't throw on there real quick was we have an injury that is going to cost Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Oh, okay. Apparently she got hurt on the SmackDown episode on the 12th, and they've announced those titles have been vacated. So the WWE Women's Tag Team titles continue to be snake bit, fellas. It's unbelievable. But we're going to have a 4-way match on Raw scheduled for the 29th, and that will be Raquel Rodriguez and a mystery partner, and Shayna Baszler, Ronda Rousey, and Io Sky and Bayley, Damage Control, and Sonya Deville teaming with Chelsea Green to determine new champions. So, I mean, that's not a bad match.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I'm not a fan of 4-way tag matches. I've talked about this before. It just turns into a battle royal, and then you have one. I've just never been a fan of those matches. What do you guys think of the women's tag titles? You said it's snake bitten. I feel like they forced it. Like, I just didn't think they were necessary. And there's been just tons of problems with it since, it seems like.
I think you got to find your footing on it, right? I mean, I think it's warranted. It needs to be there. You just got to, with anything new, right? You're gonna find what works and what doesn't. So I think it'd take a minute to warm up to it. But I don't know. There's just always too many belts happening.
Yeah, and that's kind of my beef. I think that you have to have a developed division before you go and have champions. That's my opinion, and I just think they did it. I'm not saying you can't have one. Like, I like the idea of a women's tag title.
You don't like it.
I hate it. I think it was a terrible idea from the very beginning. Right. No reason at all to have it. No. But I think you should have a developed division, though. I mean, I think they could have had, go into starting to develop women's tag teams and just get people excited about the division. And then you go into a tournament of some sort with 4 or 5 teams that people are interested in. Then they care about who wins the tag titles. You had the Iconics, weren't they? I never thought they were very good. And here they are, tag champions. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think the one difficulty that we have with the women's tag team titles in WWE is that you just don't have established teams.
Correct.
Exactly.
Growing up, we had the Rock and Roll Express, we had the Road Warriors. I mean, those are tag teams. Yeah. A lot of the tag teams that you have with women, you don't have those, those two that stay together. I mean, from any scene at all. The Iconics are probably the closest ones that, they got developed in NXT, and you've got some other ones coming up from NXT too. But, it was sad because Raquel and Liv were really starting to get over, and then this happens. You had Naomi and Sasha Banks, and they had their little kerfuffle.
Yeah.
And so that derailed it. I mean, I like the idea, and I think it's good for the women, but it is a little difficult. But I will say this out of this group, we have, Chelsea and Sonya have been teaming together for a little bit and working together.
100%. And here's the thing with women's wrestling though, is women's tag team wrestling wasn't even really, women's wrestling up until, maybe the early 80s was a throw-in match on a card. Right. They would get a big name female wrestler and she'd be on the card, and then they'd have them wrestle a local wrestler or something like that. And those matches were thrown on the card. Men's wrestling has been developing tag team wrestling for 70 years. There've been established teams since the 70s. If you look back in history, women didn't have any of that. So they're literally beginning their tag team history, 4 years ago? When you think of actually making the effort to put together female teams in the schools, all the way from whether you're looking at NXT or you're looking at if you're looking at FSW.
Right.
That's kind of my point. It's not being developed, or at least it wasn't developed back then, and I think has a lot to do with it.
And there's an opportunity there for people out there.
Sure. If tag team wrestling is different than singles. You have to understand tag team wrestling. You have to know how to work in and out, quick tags, things like that. That's all part of it. And putting together double teams. And that's a whole different situation. Like you mentioned, the Rock and Roll Express, they've wrestled together for 50 years. Yeah. It's not the women's fault.
Well,
that's not what, you know what I mean?
Like teams now, it's you just put 2 people together. and get out there and tag each other and do something. So, and then at some point they're going to split off or just disappear as a team. It's like there's no, the British Bulldogs, Demolition,
FTR,
everybody. Yeah, it was just like, this is a team. That's very rare. Even with Sasha and, it was like, let's put them together and that's cool. But they don't have that synergy. They don't have, it's not like it doesn't seem like they're on the same page.
Yeah, and that's why I like Ronda and Shayna. That's a natural team that people understand. Two MMA fighters.
Yes.
Very similar styles in the ring.
Mentality.
That team really works. And I won't be surprised if they're the ones, as long as Ronda's recovered from that broken hand, that they're the ones that end up winning these belts. I think that was kind of the plan anyway. So we'll see how that goes. But can't get that resolved on Night of Champions. Not enough time, I suppose. But